How's everybody doing today? I'm here to talk to you about universal design for learning. And let's see, anybody have a quick definition of what universal design is? You may have heard of a very famous one called the curb cut. Anybody hear about the curb cut before? Anybody want to take a shot at explaining what the curb cut is? I hope I don't have to call on somebody. Phil, do you want to?
Sure. Universal design is essentially making good decisions that benefit all people, not just those who need help. For instance, curb cuts allow people who are pushing strollers, who might be sight challenged, to see roadways in front of you. Not only does it benefit the blind people who would be coming up to the intersection knowing that there's a curb, but it would also benefit parents pushing skateboarders, rollerbladers, sidewalk people. So essentially making choices in the development of your home instruction that will benefit the largest audience.
Right, so people use the curb cut, and then I always, when I hear that, there's a little disconnect for me. How do you work this into instructional materials? Okay, so there is a gal out there who runs a Do It program up at the University of Washington. Her name is Cheryl Burkstaller. She's the author of this book, and she does a great job with many, many pragmatic steps for UDL. Okay, I can pass this book around, but she has a Do It program at the University of Washington, a website, and it's a great website. I'm going to give you one of the PDFs from that website right now and talk to you a little bit about this. I just want to point out that there are theoretical underpinnings to UDL. There's actually empirical evidence. If you go to these different checkpoints within this website, it'll actually point to research behind every checkpoint. Okay, so that's a nice thing to point to. I'm going to pass that book around. There you go. And let's talk a little bit about this. So there's a couple of ways to define UDL. I actually think of it as physical, social, or cognitive barriers. Okay, so we want to bring down those physical, social, or cognitive barriers. And let's see, she's got a number of recommended practices, but let me give you a definition of universal design for instruction. It means that rather than designing for the average student, you design instruction for students who potentially have broad ranges with respect to ability, disability, reading level, learning style, native language, race, ethnicity, and other characteristics. Okay, so some audience analysis there. You're thinking about your audience as you prepare your instruction. Okay, so she goes down the list and she does a wonderful job. She has class climate and let's see what else. Interaction, physical environments and products, delivery methods, different things like that. So let me talk to you a little bit about class climate. How many people in smaller classes actually memorize all their students' names? All right, okay. So that's a nice way to set your class climate. It's so you can establish a rapport with that student, so you have more immediacy with them. So keep in mind that if you know every student's name, they feel less anonymous. They're going to be less likely to cheat, believe it or not. Okay. How could you do that in an online environment? You're in Collaborate. Somebody raises their hand. You haven't memorized everybody's name. What can you do to act like you've known them for the last 20 years? Okay.
Isn't their name up here?
That's right. Their name is right there in the chat box. You just call out their name as you talk to them within that Collaborate session. So being approachable, being available, seeking out the student's point of view, responding. So you're probably hearing about summative evaluation in your courses. So you could do a survey every few weeks to see how things are going. Do a temperature check. You can change the trajectory of your course on the fly, week by week if needed, so you don't get a big surprise at the end when you find out that some new intervention that you tried went terribly wrong. Okay, so that is a nice way to make those changes. Let's see. You want to address all the individual needs in an inclusive manner. Person in the wheelchair who comes into the room, you know, there's no room at these pianos, there's no room at these tables, so I want you to sit over there, okay? That's a great way to single somebody out, all right? There's other ways to do this. For instance, in an online environment, like having, saying to somebody, oh, Susie, you are hard of hearing, so I'm going to put up a caption version for you later. You never want to expose that student's disability to the other students. Okay. Let's see. What else do they talk about? The interaction itself. So promote your effective communication. Speak clearly. Face the class. Okay. So I tell you what. Supplement that in-person content with online communications. So you want to communicate with your students in a couple of different ways. You want to maybe speak the directions, and then you want to have them written as well. All right. So I give an example in my workshops where I go up to a menu item, and it's something like, I tell everybody in the workshop to go to File and Print. I actually go up to File and I pause for a moment right on File, and I say, okay, you're going to find this under File and Print. For the folks who are looking down, taking notes, by the time they lift their head up and look at my monitor, they are going to miss that command if I don't pause on it for a little while. So I tend to repeat these instructions. I tend to communicate them in several different ways. And there's not necessarily a lot of work involved with that. Okay, so just want to point out that example. Encourage cooperative learning. You want these people to feel like they're in a community. It's encourage different ways for the students to interact in class discussions, group work, internet-based communications. It insists that all the students need to participate, facilitate their participation. So we're bringing down the social barriers when you do things like that. Okay. What else? Don't use jargon. It's not recommended that you use jargon. We in EdTech are very proud of our jargon. So I used to go into my first workshops and tell all the attendees to FTP their GIFs to their ISP ASAP. Okay? That was my big joke for how technical people sometimes kind of alienate other people, and sometimes they're a little proud of that, actually. So you don't want to use jargon too much. We in EdTech use jargon quite a bit. Distributed learning, blended learning, hybrid learning. Okay? Right, so also, UDL, a lot of acronyms, all sorts of things. So I tend not to use a lot of jargon, and it's worked well for me when I work with the faculty. Okay. What else? Physical environments and products. Well, you're going to be online, so it may be a virtual physical environment, but does anybody know what those chairs are hanging on the wall up in 2108? Got those big yellow chairs hanging on the wall. You'll get a special prize if you know this answer, and people who've heard this before, you're excluded. Okay. How about you, James? What are those chairs for?
For helping get somebody out if they're in a wheelchair and you want to put them in a chair and get them up a flight of stairs or whatever.
Exactly. So how many faculty in the room know about those wheelchairs? As a matter of fact, if a alarm went off right now, a fire alarm, what would you do right now if a fire alarm went off? What would you do, Roy?
Start Johnny.
I told my students, is this being recorded? I decline to answer. I'll probably one out first and have myself, and that's not what I'm going to do.
How do you know that everybody got out?
If I'm the last one to leave?
That's pretty good, but somebody rushes, a few students rush to patch and say, oh, I forgot my valuables, or something like that. So let me put it this way. At ITS, the staff here knows that if there is a fire drill, a fire alarm, that we're supposed to lock everything up, take maybe your one valuable item with you, and then meet at a central meeting place up on the mall over here so we can do a head count and make sure that nobody is locked inside of ITS. So I just want to point that out. You may want to know about these things, especially in your face-to-face class, but it's those physical environments. Is that student sitting with a pole right in front of them as you try to lecture? Are you staying in one spot so they can never see you? Different things like that. So, okay. You can arrange instructional spaces to maximize inclusion. We have many examples of that here at ITS, all these movable chairs. The LRS 112 has got a very collaborative setup. We're probably going to have something like that in the future as well. People tend to discount that, but that's a big deal. Okay, being able to gather around with your peers and work on assignments, that's a big deal actually. okay? So what else do they talk about? Delivery methods. Using curricular methods that are well organized, giving them background knowledge, or prerequisite knowledge to succeed, okay? So let's see, you've done a lot of things in your courses, or you've got a lot of recommendations on different things like, chunking things out, okay? There's one way to refer to that, that's scaffolding, that's learning scaffolding, okay? So you're chunking things out. A student knows if they go to that one module and do everything, they're set for that week, okay? So it's one-stop shopping. Anybody know why there's a dash in a phone number? Or in your social security number, okay? It makes it easier to remember. You're chunking things out, okay? So those modules provide a way of chunking things out. Also, if you look at some of the really nice syllabi here on campus, you will see things like the schedule and then micro-learning objectives right next to that. Scaffolding, okay? That's a great cognitive support. Other things that can help with cognitive supports. Well, believe it or not, when you record your lectures via Collaborate or Camtasia, something like that, it sounds trivial, but the ability to rewind your lecture is actually a very big deal when it comes to UDL. Students who have learning disabilities, students who are English as second language learners can come in there and rewind that one point. I'm sure we've all been in class where you were writing down the details for those 5 bullet points, and you got to number 4 and the slide changed. And then you said to your neighbor, "What was that?" "I don't know, I'm not sure actually." So the ability to rewind and go back and study this over and over again is very important for everybody actually. So what else? Other types of cognitive supports, outlines, class note summaries, study guides, presentation visuals with room for note-taking, so you're printing out your PowerPoints with space on the side. These give the students options for multiple ways to gain knowledge, so they're good methods. Deliver your instructions clearly in multiple ways, so maybe you write it down, it's in Blackboard electronically, and you also say it in class. Okay, I always recommend a multi-pronged attack during any instance in your course where something's mission critical for your students to know. Okay, so just want to point that out. Also, just good eye contact with people and not facing the board, speaking to them directly, not just sitting here writing and pointing. So they can hear you, maybe using a microphone if you're in a big class. Also, if you're in a smaller class, speaking loudly, different things like that. So, all right, so more with delivery methods, well, giving them multiple ways to gain knowledge. So maybe it's just not 2 big tests. Maybe it's a few quizzes, maybe they're going to put in a paper, maybe do a little bit of collaborative work, maybe do some presentations, different things like that. So it's interesting that the postulates within UDL actually lend themselves to anti-cheating. So if you think about it, if you've got a course where you've just got 2 big exams, and they're real high stakes exams, and if I don't do well on these exams, I'm not in the graduate school, my parents are gonna kill me, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and hire somebody for $500 to take this online course and do those 2 exams, an expert in the field, all right? There's a lot of motivation to do that because the student hasn't had any practice, they don't know how they're doing in the course, they're not sure if they've mastered the material, so they're getting really nervous about it, so the motivation goes up in situations like that, where if you have multiple means of expression, it gets harder to cheat. They've got an essay where they talk about maybe women's rights and how their grandmother fared through earlier times in the United States, something like that. And then the next one's maybe a group project, a wiki, and then the next one is a quiz. The next one might be a test, but the test questions are conceptual. They're not just fact regurgitation, different things like that, so they have to combine a couple of concepts to actually get the correct answer on those tests, okay? And I always give my little example. The ITSers are probably sick of hearing about my small knowledge of film theory, okay, with Laura Mulvey. She's a feminist film theorist who talks about Her postulate is about something called the male gaze. And she says that many movies, if not all movies, are made from the perspective of a man. And so you could have a question in your exam, it could be a multiple choice question. You say something like, which of the following movies is an example of the male gaze? So the student needs to know the concept of the male gaze and also have seen the movies, all right? So maybe one of those movies is Vertigo. How many people have seen Vertigo? Jimmy Stewart is dressing up his second girlfriend who looks like his first girlfriend in the mall, and the camera starts right at her ankle as she walks away and pulls back, okay? Sounds a little bit like the male gaze to me, all right? I'll leave it up to you guys to think about that, but in other words, you're combining concepts instead of saying something like, who invented the light bulb? Or when was the United States discovered? Okay, so let's see. Cheryl also talks about large visuals, tactile aids, different things like that, using big fonts, uncluttered slides, different things like that. And what else did she talk about? Talking about selecting her materials early. Believe it or not, when you select a textbook and you have a disabled student in your course, SDS gets notified about it, and they try to seek out electronic copy that can be readable by screen reading software that blind people use. If they can't find an electronic copy, they need time to shave the spine off the book and put it through a scanner page by page and scan it and make it electronic, and also proof it to make sure it's accurate, okay? So they need some time. So keep that in mind. You want to provide materials in accessible formats. I have been guilty of this. I have a student advocate who works for me, and I've caught myself coming over to him, handing him a book and saying, look at this one article. Well, he has Usher syndrome. He's visually disabled. And he says, do you have that electronic format? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I sure do. So believe it or not, electronic format is much more accessible than just a handout. And you can put these all up on Blackboard. So I just want to point that out. What else? That regular feedback, it provides these corrective opportunities so students can make those small trajectory changes for themselves in your class. So lots of regular feedback, and that can be via peers or via the instructor or maybe some kind of automated system, but good to give those students that information. What else? Assessments. Set clear expectations, provide a syllabus with clear statements, a very straightforward grading rubric. Consider using tests with a variety of formats, multiple choice, essays, short answer, papers, group works, demonstrations, portfolios, presentations as options for demonstrating knowledge. Monitor and adjust regularly, assess the student's background knowledge and current learning information, test in the same manner in which you teach. And most of all, make sure you've got a syllabus, a statement in your syllabus about accommodating students, and we can supply you with that, okay? If you're ever in doubt about how to accommodate a student, that's my job, actually. I can figure that stuff out for you. So come, get in touch with me, and I am more than happy to help you, especially in this endeavor. It's one of my passions, so please do come and see me. Now, I want to show you something. We're actually going to do a little teeny activity here. So we're going to play a little bit of Udl Bingo, all right? And there's going to be a big, big prize at the end of this, a big, big prize. So I'd like you to go ahead, use this form and check off the things you already do. Check off the things you already do in your classes. And I tell you what, there's some freebies there, those pictures. I'm going to tell you what those pictures are. Big, big prize. It's Friday. Let's see, it might be, who knows, it might be a trip to the wild animal park, wine tasting, free food. Oh, we already got that. Okay, so let's see. I want to tell you what the freebies are as you think about this. This is an automatic door in a supermarket that opens for everybody. So if you had a shopping cart, it's going to be real handy. But if you're in a walker, it's also real handy. If you have a student in a wheelchair, it's real handy. What else? This one in the middle, edit, undo. It's error tolerance is what it's called. So when you make an interface, you want to be able to back out of it, especially if you have some kind of a disability. How many people have been to sites where they put in their login and password and hit submit and it gives them some cryptic message or nothing at all? Okay. Years ago we had something in Blackboard, it would say token null. You actually had to log in twice into Blackboard about 10 years ago. Do you remember that, James?
Oh, yeah.
So that was pretty bad. You know, it didn't say, hey, do it again. It just said token null. And you stood there and picked up the phone and called us, okay? So I just want to tell you about that one freebie. The next is just the built environment, making it universally accessible. This student or person can go through this turnstile in a wheelchair. Over here we've got universal instructions, IKEA-like instructions on how to build your desk, okay, or your chair. Now if you get it at IKEA, it may not last a long time, but I just want to point that out. What else? This right here is a door handle. Now people with disabilities have difficulty gripping doors sometimes, door handles. Well, there's actually now, or there are those levers, and you can kind of lean on them. You don't have to grip them and twist them, okay? So you can lean on them to open doors. The next freebie is just class climate. That's what that thermostat is. Down below we see some scissors that are designed for people with some type of mobility impairments. They don't have to get their fingers in little holes, different things like this. They can get their hand all around them to use them. All right. Okay, so let me just walk around, or let me just check with folks. Anybody checked off a number of these? Anybody looking to win that wild animal
What we're
park?
doing?
Yes, so what you're doing right now, do you use greater than 14 point size font, sans serif, and we can clarify what that means if you need it. Do you use a microphone?
So when it's showing instructions for putting together
Those
the
are
desk.
freebies.
But, okay, oh, they're freebies.
They're
Doesn't mean
freebies.
we're providing instructions for how to do something on Blackboard.
That's right, this means that you have
Okay.
already got that square checked off.
Okay.
You're that close, much closer to that wine tasting.
That better be the one I get.
I'm seeing a lot of things being checked off here. But let me know if you have any questions about any item within this matrix.
John, what's the single one thing that people can do if there is, I mean, this isn't an easy answer, but if there was one thing you could pick out for faculty to do to make their online course accessible, or as accessible as possible, is there something that quickly comes to mind for you?
I would say there are ways to quickly make it inaccessible. I might flip that around, James,
Okay.
because there's a number of things you can do to make it accessible, and it's by degree. So if you use Microsoft Word and you put a Microsoft Word document up there, it's readable by screen readers, meaning that it'll see the different characters and speak them. But it may not speak them in the right order. There may be some problems with that, but definitely a Word document is better than taking an article at your home and scanning it as an image inadvertently and turning it into a PDF. If you put an image file up there, and it's usually a very large PDF when you do this, a screen reader can't go through the pixels and discern what the words say. So that's a big faux pas. I would definitely encourage you to put things up online electronically and do it, if you're going to give verbal directions, I would also put it in print up online. Other things like recording your lectures, I think that's a great thing to do. There really isn't one silver bullet, unfortunately. I wish there was, and I'm looking forward to the technology maturing actually, because we do speech-to-text recognition, and it's not incredible at the moment, but it's getting better. It's getting better. I remember we used to laugh about OCR in the 90s, okay? You put something through a scanner and do OCR, and you had to go back and fix about 50% of it, okay? OCR now is, up like 96%, depending on the copy you're using and the size of the font, different things like that. So these technologies are maturing, but that doesn't Because they're imperfect doesn't mean we can't chip away at things and move towards accessibility. The other thing I would say, James, is to make sure you've got that syllabus statement, make sure you are bringing that to the students' attention. They must, you should present that to them, and then they must get accommodation from SDS before you need to accommodate them. And SDS and myself, we're going to counsel you on how to accommodate them. So there's not one general approach, but I'll go ahead and turn it over to Phil here and see if he's got.
I would
any
agree with John,
suggestions.
because there are dozens, if not hundreds, of things you could do to increase the accessibility of your course. The one major thing is really approaching your course design knowing that you're going to have students who are going to need to have some type of level of accommodation. So the biggest, if there is a silver bullet, it would be just knowing that when you post something online, to think about it in terms of, well, what if a student who had a hearing disability needed to access this? Do I provide enough for that student? Or what if a student who is blind were to need to read this document? I think the realization that you might have to make accommodations is the best silver bullet there is. Just the knowledge that, yes, that's something that you need to do. Versus the checklist items, so to speak, that you could, yes, make my syllabus accessible, yes, make sure images are tagged, things like that. Just the knowledge, sitting through the session, knowing that it's an issue, something that should be addressed, is probably the biggest silver bullet, I would say.
Right, and you are getting training on that, those cognitive supports right now. You're already taking that journey towards full accessibility through the way you're doing your courses. It's chunked out, you're recording things. You're not conveying meaning with color. That's another one. You never want to say to somebody, go down to the red button to go forwards or the green button to go backwards, because they might be colorblind. However, I'd like to take a few moments and look at Jackie's bingo game. Wow, can I show this to folks, Jackie? Jackie I may have to meet her after work at that wine tasting. Pretty good there. Jackie, can you tell me about maybe 2 or 3 things you do in your classes that are listed there?
Actually, I want to start with the 2 that I don't do,
Okay,
that I
sure.
didn't adhere to.
Okay.
It's probably much like ITS. Avoid use of jargon. I think with my majors, because I'm doing upper division courses, we use jargon all the time, and that's part of being in the major. So I think it again goes with the terms that you would use specific to the different departments.
But you, Jackie, you feel comfortable with their prerequisite knowledge and
Yes,
you check that
yes,
and
because these
things
are
like
upper
that.
division
Yes,
students,
So there
yeah.
you go.
So jargon use would be permissible in an area where they would be expected to have already commanded that jargon.
Yes.
Versus undergrads
Yes.
coming in,
Right.
knowing what those.
Right.
those are.
And we're just starting to introduce the jargon in the 100
right,
level
yes,
classes.
right,
So.
exactly.
Yes.
And the other one, student seating allows for inclusion and collaboration. Because the classes are large and we have a horrible setup here. I have these long classrooms with pillars and you can't see the students in the back. And if I ever wanted to do a collaborative exercise, they've all got to get up and go outside because they can't move their chairs around or there's not enough room, to cluster them. So those are just, I think, a reflection of San Diego State.
Well, I've heard stories about people contacting their department coordinator and bringing in a latte or 2 and getting reassigned to other classrooms when they want to. So, I'm not saying that's going to always work for you, but I would pursue it if possible. You may have already with no success,
Wow.
but I have seen that happen numerous times, actually.
What size is your class, the one you're referring to now?
Oh my goodness. But I have it with a number of my classes because they are upper division and they're large, but I have a couple of 500 level classes where I may have 50 or 60 students, but the classroom that I'm in, Adams Humanities, I mean, it's a small classroom and there's no way for them to even move chairs. They're climbing. You just hope you don't have to go to the bathroom in the middle because they're climbing over each other to get in and out. So we would literally go out onto the lawn to do any type of activity. The other one that I can think of is Arts and Letters 101, where I have probably 100 students in there, but you cannot move the chairs around. So it is, it's more theater style, which is awesome. I can see everybody and they can certainly see me. And I'm pretty mobile when I'm lecturing. But to get them to work together, again, they would all have to get up and leave and no guarantee they're coming back. So because of just the solid arrangement of the seats. So it just,
How
it's
could we deal with that online? How could we deal with that online? It's, in some ways, maybe gives us more freedom, actually.
I think so. This is the first
Okay,
semester
yeah.
I've used group blog, and
Uh-huh.
I've loved it. Because they actually do talk to each other and exchange ideas and check each other's work. And so the group blog has been very effective for my class.
An underutilized feature in Collaborate that's very, very handy is you can do breakout rooms. So you can have maybe 50 students, and you can say, okay, I'm going to break into groups of 5, something like that. Go ahead and talk about this concept. I may stop by your group, but then we're going to reconvene and pull everything you've done on the whiteboard to the main area. Okay, so it's a pretty cool little endeavor within Collaborate, so I just want to point that out. Let's see, let me move over to this gentleman over here at the time. Roy, tell me a little bit about 1 or 2 of the things you do in your classes.
We're recording.
Okay. Well, I definitely checked off welcoming positive environment. And before you were here, I shared with everyone that when I taught online last summer, which feels like a long time ago, that you were able to be the pilot. I was co-pilot. So you were able to help me help the students and let them know not just what this course is about, but also the technical side and the support aspect. And I thought that was going to be definitely something that went really well to basically set that stage. So welcoming environment, I think, is something that I try to bring to all my classes, traditional model as well as online. I will say just a couple things about avoiding jargon and a glossary of course terms. Some of the material I teach is pretty dense. And I mean that particularly for, like, I teach a course on atheism and humanism, and we have like a glossary at the front of this book. It's like a Cambridge companion book. And so it's very dense in some respects. But in my hip hop course, I sometimes assume, okay, students know a lot of the language. But I was teaching on the history of graffiti like yesterday, and a lot of the terms of the subculture of graffiti is not really known. And so I did an exercise where I began sort of breaking down what the basic terms mean, and I think they really appreciated that. So going forward, I think this summer I may do a blog or have a section where people can basically post, okay, what are some jargon? What are some terms that get repeated or you're unfamiliar with? And then maybe at the end of the week, I spend a couple minutes basically filling in the information, or maybe even empowering them. Okay, what could be, maybe what do you think the term means? So I think I'll be doing a little bit more glossary work with students and trying to get the jargon, which is sort of necessary for the technical side, but also breaking some of those down. So those are a couple things that came to my mind.
Sounds great, Roy. I've heard of faculty actually having the students produce the glossary and using the term in context, something like that. But I was there, I witnessed Roy in action. He did a fabulous job. And what I did for Roy was I came in for about 5 minutes and I just did a little meet and greet with the students and told them about the buttonologies, alluded to some of the protocols in the room, different things like that. Roy coined, well, he didn't coin a phrase, but he associated a phrase with his course that I thought was extremely useful, and I'm a musician, so it really rang with me, but it was call and response. So every time Roy would talk about something in his Collaborate room, he made them respond. Did you get that? He would do knowledge checks, different things like that. So he was very good about that, and I think he had that was one of the contributing factors to having a successful course. Thank you, Roy. Okay, Amy, let's see what you got there. All right, Amy may be a winner as well. Do you want to tell us about 1 or 2 things you do, Amy?
Sure. Let's see. Pick the most interesting one. Well, verbal description and illustrations. In particular, in my class, we have a lot of different aspects in journalism where we need to explain to the students different modes of storytelling. And so there's oftentimes a lot of illustrations that we use to help show them that process. And so oftentimes what we'll do is we'll have in particular, I'll have up there a series, depending on the week, a series of diagrams that the students can look at, but then providing additional explanation, not just throwing it at them for them to figure out and navigate. And then following up with them and asking them how do they navigate through that particular illustration as well, and having discussions with that.
That's excellent. I actually had an economics professor a couple of years ago with a visually disabled student in their class teaching at a distance, and he would bring up a big chart of gross national earnings across different years for different countries, and he'd say, look at Japan in 1992. I said, listen, you can't do that, okay? You have to say, look at the 3 billion Japan made in 1992. You need to verbally describe everything going on in that chart, because the student can't visually extrapolate to that one area and see the total of that bar chart. Okay, so very good. Okay, Elizabeth, how about you?
The course that I've taught repeatedly at the Imperial Valley campus is abnormal psychology. And I was thinking about the box for participatory learning activities. Students like to apply what they're learning about abnormal psychology. Usually they ask to diagnose each other to their ex-friends and ex-boyfriends and girlfriends and in-laws and things. But I try to have lots of examples of case studies where they can try to figure out, okay, is this person maybe better classified as having this disorder versus another. And so we talk a lot in class about the different disorders and then try to apply their knowledge in class by doing that.
Wonderful. So you're giving them lots of practice, showing them many conceptual models. That's key to conceptual learning, seeing different instances of it. You can't show a child a poodle and say it's a dog and then never show them another dog. And after that, they're going to think all dogs look like a poodle. Okay, so that's a great approach. And let's see, how about you? And can you remind me of your name?
Mona.
Mona?
Yep. Most of the stuff that everyone talked about, I kind of do some form of it. But what I don't do, for example, I don't use microphone in my class. It's not big enough to use a microphone.
Okay.
Maybe I should. I don't use a 14, the font 14. I don't do that. I'm looking at what I don't do because I want to see if I can do them. And I don't pre-record my lectures, which is, now that I'm exposed to Camtasia, I might start doing it. So that would be good. What else? I am bad in terms of videos. I don't include subtitles or captions because I take them sometimes from YouTube, and I don't know if there is a click that I could do for YouTube and it will create like caption, but I should look into that.
I can tell you that some of the videos up on YouTube do have captions. If you can give us some lead time, we can get them captioned for you if you have a disabled student in your class.
Yeah.
Okay, so come and talk to me if you need help with that.
Sure.
We'll get it going for you. It does help to have some lead time. It takes a few days to actually get these captioned for you. But I can definitely help you with that.
When you do that, do those get captioned for everybody then on YouTube?
If you place them back on YouTube, so yes, there's a way to introduce captions back into YouTube, but
Then you have to own the video.
Yes, yes. Currently, we keep these offline in a private area so that the student can watch them with the captions, because we're doing due diligence, but there certain things around the Teach Act, around copyright. We don't want to expose things we've altered to the entire world.
There's one thing, moving on, that you'd mentioned some of the classes you were teaching in the Athletic Center, Fowler Athletic Center,
Yeah.
Little Theater. I would strongly recommend using a microphone in those classes, just because chances are, you know, there's somebody in there with a hearing deficit that, or somebody for whom English is a second language, or for whatever reason, they would really benefit from that. And you might also find that when you get home, you're not as zapped as you are when you have to project
Yeah, true.
in that large venue.
Yeah.
As far as the 14-point font, John, are you referring to even something like your syllabi should be in 14-point font?
I would say it's more like PowerPoint.
Because I've read some things that say you shouldn't go less than 24-point font in PowerPoint. I think that was.
And Bob has
remember where I
done
saw
some
that.
research into fonts. Do you have any comments on that, Bob?
Well, yeah, in general, it's gotten harder and harder to make kind of broad guidelines, just because there's so many different devices that now everybody's reading stuff on, and resolutions of things. So the one thing that we found that helped people read any text was just to loosen up the letter spacing a little bit. Tight letter spacing makes it hard, and you don't always have control over that, but you can choose a font that has kind of reasonable letter spacing, like Verdana, and some of the fonts that are designed for computer displays, like Verdana, are useful to use for that reason, that they just have built-in letter spacing.
Right, that spacing is also referred to as kerning in the industry. So if you're in
That's
Word,
jargon.
so current, if you're in Word or PowerPoint or whatever, and you see an option to adjust kerning, Kerning, that's the space between letters. And most of those programs do allow you to space that out a little bit more.
Kerning is the space between
Between
two individual
two
letters.
individual
Tracking
characters.
is all of the letters.
Correct.
That is true, and the only reason I'm suggesting choose a font is then you don't have to think.
Then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, and that just goes with having things chunked out on the page with white space. So you see these nice syllabi where you've got a huge delimiter there. It's a text box. You actually don't want to use text boxes in Microsoft Word. You can put borders on text instead. Text boxes float. They're not interpreted in the correct logical reading order. But you can put borders on text, and it's a great way to really delimit the content and chunk it out. I always kid people about the email you receive that's block text about this long, and you open it up, and I always say, what do you do with that? What's the first thing you do with that when you open that up in the morning?
Don't read.
You close it and go on to something else and come back to it later. Well, that happens sometimes. So if you can chunk that information out, it makes it much more readable. And the same goes for your syllabi and other documents you're creating for your courses. Any questions about anything at all? Anything at all? Yes.
So like in my classes, which are unlike most of the ones here, they're small, they're graduate, lectures are short or non-existent. It's more about group work, and it's about often students collaborating together, creating something in real time. I've never had somebody with visual difficulties. I don't know how I would accommodate them. Would I have to have a whole separate arrangement with them? Because they wouldn't be able to collaborate in real time and have to use a screen reader, for example.
Well, it depends. For instance, maybe they're delivering the collaborative product. So maybe it's a group presentation, and instead of just moving through a website, maybe their colleague brings up the website, but they memorize their script, something like that. You could also have an interpreter in the room, depending on the disability, but maybe they're deaf, something like that. Somebody actually doing it for them on the fly. It really is the materials themselves. You want to make sure those are accessible. You want to make sure you give them different venues for communication in their group. So if they use a TTY line or something like that, maybe they should have phone conferences. If they are using screen readers, you want to make sure that everything's screen readable that they're working with. Something like that. So I think it would be pretty contextual regarding their disability and the learning endeavor, but I bet we could figure out how to do that.
So you've been here 35 years?
Well, I guess our field doesn't attract people who have that challenge.
Well, I know there was a guy who I worked with, I think it might have been just last year, year before, who was in a wheelchair, young man, or not so young, so. I'm curious, have you others had people who've had special needs in their classes?
I've had sign language interpreters and so forth in my classes. And then when I put a movie on, for example, I have a caption below. But to be really frank with you, just sort of honest, I think that it's sort of a bias that I have. Just what you talked about, the idea that, because my assumption, just ignorance, I guess, is to think that, okay, if this is going to be an online class, then I won't have any disability issues. That's sort of my running assumption. It's just sort of this thing that I didn't think about, but it's something I need to be cognitive of. Because the thesis you're working under is if we do this, make this accessible for fewer, making it accessible for the majority, right? You know, sort of this idea of an inclusive academic space. So it's very helpful to be conscious of this and this blind spots that, you know, that I even have and so forth.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay, I tell you what, everybody here wins the prize. And the prize is a consult with me to go through your course and check it for accessibility and universal design for learning. Okay, so please come and see me about that. And there's always going to be, you know, areas you're not sure about. I'd be glad to clarify those for you. So please do take me up on that offer. I'd be happy to help you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.